We are recording right now. Okay, and we are at 5 o'clock, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, thank you. And you have the roll call, the attendance? Is everybody here?
I will check in just a second. Are you seeing, let's see, I separated my screen here. What are we seeing? Oh, you don't have anything on the screen yet, right?
No, we have you.
There we go. Now you should have it. There it goes. Okay.
Okay, got it.
So who do we have? We have Peter, Susan, Kathy, Dan, Jim, Dana, Nate, Ken Marcourt. Welcome, Ken.
Hello.
And Pat Trainer was possibly going to call in, but she had indicated to me that she was going to be not near a computer. So if we get someone participating by phone, it would probably be Pat. And then
Right.
Daphne, my colleague Daphne Shu is also here with us today, gracing us with her presence.
Very good, thank you. Hello.
Hi.
Okay, we'll call the October 14th meeting of the Pedestrian Bike and Transit Committee to order. And with that, is there anybody out there, Mark, who has a public comment?
I would like to make a comment.
Susan?
Yeah, the pedestrian warning signs that we put out, the one on Pheasant Branch Road, there are lots of positive comments about it. It's a really good asset.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, with that, then we'll close that section and we'll move on to the minutes. Has everybody had an opportunity to take a look at them?
Yes.
And if so, do we have a motion to approve?
I'd make that motion.
Kathy,
Who was the second? I'm sorry.
Dana.
Thank you, Dana.
okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Our next item is a request for an in-street pedestrian crossing sign at Stonefield Road between Walnut Circle and Beechwood Willow Trail intersection.
All right. Is Lindsay available? Is Lindsay here? I don't see her on the.
I didn't see you, Lindsay.
Yeah, I don't either.
Participants.
Well, she doesn't have to be present. I just figured she would be. So Lindsay is a resident on Stonefield Road who lives near this intersection. I don't remember which house, but she said she's at a corner. So she's, she took these photos.
Mm-hmm.
And she had sent a letter to her neighbors, or an email, I should say, that she shared with her her neighbors requesting. Let's see, here it is. Her goal is to make Stonefield a safer and slower road, and she's expressing concern about further reductions in speed, wanting to have that be the result. And so she saw these in-street pedestrian crossing signs going around, and she basically said, hey, can we get one of those? So that's what's before you. I didn't know how else to handle it other than to bring it to you folks. I offered to her that we could do that. I think this gets back to what Alder Olson has been saying and what the committee has been discussing, which is developing criteria, prioritization, all that. Obviously, at your last meeting, you adopted a list of 10 locations which have now been installed. Although for some reason I heard someone say only 9 were installed, and I'm not sure, I don't remember where I heard that. But I looked at the minutes and it listed 10 locations. So I don't know if we have an extra one or not. It's beside the point. The question is, how do you want to deal with this request? This is a crosswalk that is mid-block. I asked Sean Stowski about the history of this crosswalk. I think I have that email in your, there it is. And he says he didn't know why that was constructed either. It just seemed kind of odd that it's in that location. It's been there for over 30 years. You know, we're not sure why it's there. It's just an unusual spot. And so that is the request is here's the crosswalk as shown on the aerial photography. So the railroad tracks are just off the screen to the bottom left. And Walnut Circle is at the bottom right. And then
Is that a particularly long block?
this is not left to right. No, it's
Doesn't look like.
in fact, well, it's not. I mean, you can see it's only 2 houses, 2 driveways.
Yeah.
So I
And
wonder,
is there a reason they don't have a crosswalk on the left?
that was my question as well. I think I said to, I said, any idea why there isn't a crosswalk at Walnut Circle, given that one exists at Beechwood Willow Trail? Oh, I'm sorry, this is Willow Trail, not Walnut Circle. So I asked Sean that same question. He said it shouldn't be related to the railroad, because I thought maybe they wanted the crosswalk away from there or a curve. He said Walnut has the sidewalk that crosses the Greenway to Cypress, so Walnut might be a good place to cross Stonefield, even though there's no sidewalk connection from Stonefield to the bulb where the sidewalk starts. The horizontal curve at Walnut isn't really significant, so it shouldn't prevent a crosswalk either. So he doesn't know why there's not a crosswalk there. So that's a whole nother, I mean, I suppose one could add a crosswalk there and replace the one that's here, although that obviously costs some money. But this intersection to the east has a crosswalk. Why isn't there one to the west? I just don't know. So that's one issue, I guess. And then the second is there a need for a in-street, here's some images that she took that show kids crossing the road. The other factor here is Stonefield is quite wide. It's wider than a typical residential street. I don't remember the width, but I just, from memory, it's a pretty wide street. It's probably 40 or 44 feet wide. So if you'd like to give feedback on this now, or if you'd like to see if she is available for the next meeting, that's another option, I suppose. Lindsay, are you here now in the meantime? I don't see her.
Do we have any more of these signs?
I was going to ask Sean prior to the meeting, but he's out this week, so I don't know the answer to that. I was hoping maybe you, Dan, or Kathy, or Susan would know if where this idea of 9 crossings being installed versus 10 came from, or did I dream that? I thought somebody said we installed 9.
Don't know.
I remember when we were originally discussing it, seemed to be some confusion as to whether or not we were going to have 9 or 10. So
Yeah.
it may be the number of signs that we have.
Well, I believe we had 10. We budgeted for 10. But when I checked my email and the list that I gave Mike, that had 10 on them. And I listened to the tape for the minutes, the recording. So
If we have another one, I think that we could put it there for now. I think when we do the standards for the intersections, we should look at whether if we can avoid some of these mid-block crossings.
Yeah.
And also, I think we should start a list of other intersections when people call in. We should have a list and start budgeting for these signs, but make sure that going forward, we have a list of other requests for them.
Yeah, Kathy, I agree with you. The mid-block crossing on such a short block actually sounds a little dangerous in terms of, the pedestrians crossing. I think they'd be better off at the intersection.
Yeah.
So we definitely need a policy about that.
I think we also should then create some kind of guidelines or policy for these signs so that when people do ask that, we're not just necessarily putting them all over because somebody asked,
Right.
that there is some kind of guideline, some kind of policy that so that everybody gets a fair shake at it.
Mm-hmm. But if we compile the list, then we can evaluate the entire list.
Well, you wanted a list of...
As requests come in for them.
Okay. I see what you're
And
saying.
the list of where we have them.
And I agree where appropriate. I've never understood a mid-block, especially a short block like that, a mid-block crosswalk. That's just problematic.
Yeah, I think in this case, is there a stop sign at the crosswalk? Where would this be? On the east there on Stonefield?
No, there is not.
See, what I'm wondering about is somebody comes to this crosswalk here, they're driving, and in less than, I'm guessing, not much more than 100 feet, all of a sudden there's another crosswalk and there's
Yeah.
not an intersection. I would think as a driver that they may think that the crosswalk is coming up at the next intersection or something.
Right.
And I think for that reason, it would make sense to put a sign there in lieu of getting rid of that crosswalk completely.
Are you talking about a westbound driver, Jim? The driver coming from the right
Right,
from this?
a westbound driver.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, what do you have there? One house, two houses at most along
Yeah.
Stone?
Yeah, it's just an odd, we don't know what the history of it is. It's just an odd location, no question.
Could we refer this to Public Works to let the traffic engineers weigh in on whether this crosswalk should even be there, or would it be better to be moved down to the intersection? No, that's not what they're asking, but I
Is that
just
a mo-
see.
I think
I
think that that's a good idea, Susan. But in the meantime, we should probably deal with that's the fact that that's where the crosswalk is.
Right,
It's not,
yeah, I
it's
agree
not,
on that.
It's not likely to get changed soon. So the question is whether we want to put a pedestrian sign there. I think it's an appropriate location for a pedestrian sign.
Well, I would make a motion that we put a pedestrian sign in at this location and also refer this whole issue to Public Works and ask them to define or determine what would be the safest place for a crosswalk.
I
So-
have two questions on that, Susan. We don't have a sign right now. Would we ask for this in the future budget, or how would we pay for that sign?
Oh, that's another whole issue. I thought we had an extra sign.
Well, how about this? If you wish to place, if we have a surplus sign, then place it here. So place a sign
Right.
here, still is one in our inventory. That would be one way you could handle it. Or like Kathy said, you need to purchase another sign, and that's not budgeted.
Okay, this
So-
is going to be a complicated motion.
And then my second question, Susan, is referring it back to Public Works. Why can't we, as the Pedestrian Bike Transit Committee, request that it's being moved, that it's our opinion that it's not in a safe location, and request that Public Works takes a look at it, instead of that just saying, okay, what do you think about this? That we got to give that weigh in on this, that we don't think that this looks like a safe option.
Okay, that's better wording. I'm certain they're going to say it's not safe.
Well, that's fine, but I just think that the pedestrian bike transit, we have to own our voice
Yeah.
on some of these issues.
Yes. No, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, I'll
Well,
second your
can you
motion
write
with that
something-
promotion.
Up that will encompass all of this.
So what I'm saying is, Kathy, you just seconded.
Yes,
So the motion would be to place a sign at this crosswalk, this mid-block crosswalk,
If we
If
have
there-
one.
if there's still one in our inventory, and to refer to the Public Works Committee whether the crosswalk should be moved west to Walnut Circle.
But in the language, I think Kathy was asking for more, should it? It is Bike and Ped's opinion that it should be. Is that what you're saying, Kathy?
yes, it is, that we
We
take a
want to
lead.
make a statement instead of a question.
Okay, that we request that Public Works move that crosswalk.
Mhm.
Okay.
I had another option here when we put in the sign at Franklin and Park Street. That was with the idea that the school would be back in session, the high school, Sauk Trail and Cromery. What about the option of moving that sign to this location on Stonefield until school gets back into session, and then request in the budget, request the purchase of another sign?
I would say that one should maybe stay there because Park Street is so heavily traveled and we've got kids out wandering around all the time. I've driven through there several times and it's truly slowed down traffic, which
Yes,
was
it
a
has.
concern of those people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, which sign were you talking about? There's Park Elmwood or Park at
Park
Franklin?
in Franklin,
And Franklin.
Okay.
just because that's such a heavily traveled road.
Okay. You want me to review the motion one more time, or I think we all?
Yeah.
To place the sign at this mid-block crosswalk, if one is still in our inventory, and to request that the Public Works Committee move the crosswalk west to Walnut Circle, to move the mid-block crosswalk west to Walnut Circle.
Kathy and Susan, is that good?
Yeah, that's fine.
I second it.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments?
And the minutes will reflect that you reviewed, because they were in your packet, and we also discussed it, reviewed Stowski's email, which
Correct.
it showed, yeah, it didn't, based on his email, it seems like we could do that, so.
Should be able to.
I had one question. Do we want to include in that recommendation, if there was not one in inventory, that one be purchased?
Do we have, is there any funding? How does anybody remember how much these signs were?
No.
Does 3,000 come to mind?
Yes, yeah, I was gonna say that, Kathy. I think that was for the 10 of them, so that's 300 apiece.
So roughly 300 apiece?
Yeah,
Mark, you got petty cash of $300 in your
I
drawer.
was gonna say, that's one zoning variance application.
So you probably do have it in your drawer.
I've got a few pens I could sell. We could do a bake sale.
Well, I
Okay.
think if we don't have the budget for it, then we make a list and we
Bring it to the next budget.
bring, yeah, I think we should, I don't know if it's in this budget or not, but, maybe we should request more budget for these signs. They seem to be well received, but.
We didn't budget for any of these signs in
Right.
2021. We budgeted for some speed signs, but as we all know, 2021's budget is not an easy one.
Right.
No.
I will channel my public works colleagues here and say that if you start placing these at every crosswalk, they can start losing their effectiveness.
Exactly.
That's
yeah.
correct.
So
And that's why,
you watch this. You're welcome.
and that's why I think we need to have a criteria.
Okay. Sorry, I'm looking for the next agenda item already here.
Okay,
We haven't
Did we-
voted yet, have we?
yeah, we haven't voted on that. So does everybody remember the motion? Okay, no other questions, comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Aye.
Those
Could I
opposed?
make a motion that this committee work on criteria for where these are placed? Do we need a motion for that?
You could. It's as we've discussed, and Kathy will tell you too. She's been extraordinarily patient waiting for this to happen. What we discussed at the last meeting was that our focus has been the comp plan, and from that, in the comp plan, there's a reference to establishing criteria. So I would argue, I would respectfully say that it's being addressed, but if you wish to reemphasize that, that's certainly your
I
prerogative.
would like to emphasize it.
Well, I think in the comp plan, don't we have a list of things that we will be reviewing, and we can add pedestrian
Yeah, why don't-
crossing signs also to that
I-
list?
That would be my preference. What Susan
Okay.
said. So
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, shall we move on? Now we're going to look at a all-way stop at South Avenue and Middleton Street. And Kathy, you requested that this be put on the agenda?
Yes, I did. It has been to Public Works, and Public Works has reviewed this. I wanted this committee to look at this through the filter that we use for like complete streets, and more is the pedestrian instead of a Public Works. It doesn't meet the criteria because of the cars that are traveling there. One thing that we did put in a pedestrian sign that's already been hit, so maybe that's gone, and maybe that's the 10th sign. I don't know. But
there's still a sign there as of yesterday.
Okay. The reason I brought this on is because of that intersection. There's a retaining wall. It's difficult to see. There's a long stretch where there's no control crossings for pedestrians or bikes. It goes from Park Street to Parmenter, and there's a hill that interferes with that too. I'm more concerned with the crossing right now. We did request that the police come out and patrol for speeding, but for some reason they already had installed the speed reading board, and that was not supposed to happen. So I don't know what's going on with that, but the police were supposed to be doing some monitoring for speed. But I wanted to look at this through the lens of a complete street package. The kids use this for walking back and forth to school. There's not a good crossover, like if you're biking from, well, I might get my directions, but the portion of Fox Ridge that's closer to the ponds, people don't like to bike down Parmenter, so this would be the way that they would come to downtown Middleton. And I just think that this would be a good place to put in a safer crossing.
The biggest problem, there's two issues that I see.
Yeah, there's no
and that's the hill that Kathy mentioned, and then maybe you also mentioned this, Kathy, and I was focusing on getting the screen going here, but this northeast corner has a major obstruction.
Yeah.
So
That's a real problem. Is there even a sidewalk there?
no,
There is not.
There is no sidewalk, no.
We need a sidewalk.
They would have to take down half of the hill to do that sidewalk. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a 25-foot slope on there that you really don't see or you don't notice it.
Yeah.
I think there's other places that we've bypassed having a sidewalk, and this would be one of them. I think that it would be really difficult to put in a sidewalk there.
Can I make a comment? I live on South Avenue, and I think this entirely missed the point. The issue is trying to slow down the traffic on South Avenue. And we sit out in front because of the COVID issues. And there's a lot of people walking, and sometimes you have to walk in the street to get around the families with little children and bicycles on the sidewalk. But you know, this is almost a 5-block shot from Parmenter down to Park Street, and there's nothing to slow down the traffic. We have families. We have 4 families here with small children. The parents, you know, try to make sure their kids don't ride their tricycles or bikes down the driveway and into the street. When we sit out there, I would say 1 out of 5 cars is speeding. We've seen cars that don't even stop at that intersection that we're talking about. They kind of roll their way through them. And then with the apartment down on below the 7300 block of South Avenue, people pull out of there in that intersection across, and they're speeding by the time they get up to the intersection of Middleton and South Avenue. The big issue is slowing down traffic on this street.
Well, I do think it's both of those things. What I'm thinking though is Public Works said a stop sign isn't a way to control the speed of the traffic, but I do agree with you that speed is a problem.
It's a very wide road. This is my neighborhood too, and South Ave. I mean, it's probably what 36 feet curb to curb, and it's just a freeway from that whole 5 blocks, and you know, especially when you get down to South and Henry Street, that's a lot of pavement there where the train track goes through.
Well, it's
That's
Is-
right.
used by a lot of people, you know, for an alternate route instead of going down Parmenter, not only the
Yes.
bicyclists, but also the people in the cars. It's a quick way to get to University Avenue from the southwestern part of the city by Strickers and Tiedemann's Pond.
Mhm.
It
I
seems-
have a suggestion. Because of the width of the street, could the city stripe bike paths and parking lanes on it, which would encourage people to, it would visually narrow the width of the street for drivers and hopefully slow them down?
I have seen 2 cars parked on both sides of the street and 2 cars coming down the street, and neither one slows down. You know, I mean, I don't know how to approach this problem, honestly. Any ideas would be good. Whatever they can do to slow down the traffic would be great.
I would like to try the 4-way stop on there for the reasons mentioned and for the pedestrian, for safety, for crossing there.
Well, I would like to include at least on one side some bike lanes, because I know on High Road, getting the bike lanes and the parking put in has slowed down traffic there. And that's again, another wide street.
One of you, I don't remember who made the comment. Oh, it was Ken. I think made a really good point that I'd never thought of before, and I've think a lot about ped bike issues too, and that is this notion of people taking South Avenue as an alternative to Parmenter and University. I think that's a really, really good point. I've never thought of that before, Ken. So when you're coming up from Fox Ridge, instead of going on Parmenter and now going through 2 stop signs at Hubbard and Elmwood, and then the traffic signal at University, people are instead turning South Avenue. Now the problem is, when you go to Park Street, you've got to make that left turn. So that's your disincentive for going that way. But my guess is from what you're saying is people are still willing to do that because South Avenue has no restrictions. And depending on time of day, crossing Park Street's not impossible. Whereas if you go down Parmenter through downtown, there's usually congestion and people go slower, which shows that congestion and choke points actually slow people, proving the point.
Yeah.
That's an excellent argument, I think.
Right.
One thing we tried to discuss with some people, I can't remember who we talked to, was trying to put in some speed bumps, like they have at High Point.
Were you talking to Corey Mace?
I can't remember. That was a couple of years ago.
Okay.
But that's one alternative, is to try to slow down traffic, is to put in speed bumps. I mean, it's done a wonderful job on
Parmenter?
High Point.
High Point.
Well, Parmenter has some too.
Yeah.
Yes. I would make the comment, and from Public Works, speed bumps are really difficult for snowplows.
I understand that.
So I would prefer the stop sign and striping to make it a narrower street visually, even though cars don't park there, but striping for bicycle lanes.
One thing we might want to consider at that intersection is removing some of the parking along that retaining wall section so that that doesn't obstruct the view. Push it back a little further.
Yes, because I came through there, and because a mail truck was parked there, I couldn't see the oncoming car.
Yeah. So, Ken, I want to hear more from what your thoughts are. Would you be in favor of a 4-way stop here, or would you rather see the speed bumps? Although public, like Susan said, the bumps are more difficult to maintain.
Anything to slow down the traffic.
Could we try the 4-way stop? What my plan is if we get a recommendation from Pedestrian Bike Transit, that I would take this to the council and ask them to put it in, to approve it.
Kathy, it should probably go through by Public Works. And then
It already went through Public Works, and we
That's
got
right, for the stop sign.
Yeah.
Could we bulb out the corners? So there's a less distance for people to cross, and then a visual cue for drivers too, that they need to slow down when they get to that intersection.
That would be a good idea. That would be something I think we'd need to budget. I mean,
Little
stop
more.
signs, yeah,
Little more engineering involved there. Yeah.
but it's a great idea. I mean, that would definitely, you wouldn't be able to park so close to the intersection. And it would definitely it would narrow the street there.
Well, this street kind of screams out for any traffic calming measures that you can have. So islands, bump outs, anything, because it's a very wide, fast street. And as it gets used more, it should have. But those are all great ideas and things that we, again, as you were talking, Kathy, we should compile a list of these as we have these issues of these various different streets, so that when they come up, we can make sure that all the bike and ped recommendations for these streets have already been done. We've already talked them through.
Mm-hmm.
We already have a list of them. They're ready to go. Because those kind of items will have to be put into the budget. On the other hand, the stop sign is, while not ideal, is certainly a way to to make a start, kind of like what we did downtown.
Yeah.
And a stop sign is something that we can do in the short term, where some of these others are really, really good ideas, but
Yeah, well, that's why I'm
we can't do
suggesting
them in the short term.
striking.
One question, the striping, but Nate, you brought up the pedestrian island too, and I think that's a good idea. Are those less expensive than the bump outs?
Like the pork chop or the bump
No,
outs?
the island in between, like the separates the, in the middle of the street, you put an island in there so that the people can walk halfway and then the other half, and it kind of slows people down. Is that less expensive than the bump outs on the corners?
They could be, because a lot of times the utilities are on those corners and they may have to be moved, or curb cuts have to be changed for wheelchairs and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And the bump outs will affect bike traffic,
Mm-hmm.
because that makes them go around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just as a point, we were sitting out there one day when the police department put up one of these signs that has the speed of cars and vehicles, and a bicycle came down there and was hitting 35 miles an hour, according to.
Yeah, the bikes will go fast too.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Sometimes they don't use the pedestrians in the walkways,
No, they don't. No. Mm-mm. So,
what I pulled on your screen was something I had on my phone. I just emailed it to myself. This is an example of what Nate was talking about. I know you all know what this is. This is at the new, I took this picture on Sunday. It's at the new school, elementary school. What's it called?
The farms.
Hope Farms.
Yeah. So if you haven't been out there, this is Shea Road. And this is a street coming in from an existing subdivision, the Blackhawk subdivision. And so here, the school's to the left, and this is, they designed it. And as Nate said, when you design it at the beginning, you can, do the inlets like you see there. You can design them so that it's properly done. But when you retrofit it, it can be tricky because, you have to alter where the drainage inlets are. But the center island, there's an example of that was just put in at Donna Drive and Spring Grove Court as part of the Donna Drive reconstruction project. We'll tell you.
Yep. And
that's what you're talking about, right? Is that?
Well, that keeps cars from going around when people are stopped and ready to turn and cutting around people, and that's really good.
It slows traffic.
It will slow traffic.
Although there at Donna Drive, it was done on a, it was done on a curve, but so I don't know if it was done so much to slow traffic there. But
it was done to slow traffic.
Does it? Okay.
Yes, and citizens requested that it be done for slowing traffic.
Okay.
Okay, so do we have a consensus of how we want to move forward? Or do we have a motion, or?
I would like to make a motion that we recommend a stop sign be put there to make it a four-way stop.
Would we have a second to that?
I'll second.
Okay, good. Do we want to include extra striping, or should we just start with the stop sign and?
My caution
I
with
would,
this.
I would
Sorry.
put the striping in.
If we did the striping though, Marcus, that's not on our pedestrian map, or a bicycle map, right?
It's not. Kathy will probably laugh at me for saying this. Um, because if you make them a designated bike lane, you're going to lose parking on one side of the street.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I mean, and then there's the school of thought that if you take parking off the street, you result in faster cars, and that's what Kathy is going to probably chuckle about. So,
Could you stripe it for parking?
like Park Lawn Place, essentially, is what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I
where
think-
there's just a stripe for parking, even though there aren't cars parked there. It still gives a
I
visual.
think if we start with the four-way stop and see what happens, I would be very happy with that.
And cars
Okay.
do park here.
I think
Yeah.
we should take a progressive approach at this and start with a stop sign and see how the traffic does. And if it's worse than you would have to come back and review it and take another corrective action.
Yeah, and the only painting I would suggest is painting the curb by that house that so it doesn't have parking so close to the corner. But then you'd have to take it to L&O. And do we want to go that far right now, or?
Well, I think the stop sign goes to L&O either way, does it not?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. Yeah.
So I think that's a good idea if you're concerned about visit site distance. We do have a vision triangle ordinance. I could look into whether, I mean, I think there's an attempt here, although it's overgrown. There's an attempt to have this comply with their vision triangle in our zone ordinance. But then at the same time, they planted arborvitae here, which are going to encroach. So I haven't assessed this. It definitely is impeding vision. So whether it's against that's impeding vision. So we can go out and check that. But if you want to recommend the parking restrictions, you could include that in your motion if you wanted to.
Is that
Normally
property on the National Register?
It is. It's a landmark, a Middleton landmark, but not national.
Okay.
I'm also,
I don't think that would affect the vision triangle. I mean,
well, unfortunately,
landmark or not.
Unfortunately, the way the vision triangle reads, the ordinance, and actually I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this because I was going to look this up today and I hadn't done it yet for a different reason. So our zoning ordinance defines it's in section 10.140, page 109. So it states it's based on the location of the sidewalks, which is of course a problem because there aren't sidewalks. So it's 15 feet back from where the sidewalks intersect. So it's a very, this ordinance needs to be, it needs to be updated. That's a big flaw of the ordinance. That's what I was afraid of. And then it restricts everything within that triangle to a height of 30 inches or less. And so what the property owners did here, obviously, is they have a retaining wall that's lower, but now they've put some plants here, it looks like, and this is from, I don't know what the year here is.
It's a few years ago.
No, it says last year at the bottom. Where does it say that? I see July 2019 at the bottom.
Oh, okay. I thought it was older than that.
So anyway, we'll evaluate that.
What could we say that we restrict parking within 25 feet of the corners? Would that help?
I think the ordinance, isn't the law that it's 15 feet from a crosswalk?
It's 15, but I'm saying in this particular intersection that this property, we back the no parking, we back it up a little, or should we just leave it? And that's a comment I've heard is that it's hard to see when cars are parked.
It's hard. And I'm questioning the 30 inches even for the vegetation makes it difficult on that one.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it seems it does.
So if you'd like to so your motion is regarding the stop sign, adding the four-way stop. If you'd like staff to look at the vision triangle, that would be, I think, appropriate too. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just saying that that's a tool you have to help make this safer. And well, I'll wait to be given direction if I don't want to.
I think staff should look at the vision triangle.
Is that part of the motion? I'm sorry, who made the motion?
That was me, that was Jeremy. But I wanted to add to that, maybe to explain why we're making the motion. It's not just that particular intersection, but it's the amount of traffic that does not have to stop. There's no stop from Parmenter to Park. And that's the only four-way intersection there.
Right.
There are no other ones along South between those two streets.
Good.
It's the only place where you can slow them up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Unless there's a train.
Well, and there's a lot of those, as Kathy will tell you.
Mhm.
So maybe that's your rationale. Maybe it would be helpful to make your case here, referring to the committee's case, that the basis for this is it's the only four-way intersection. It's near the hill, or at the base of the hill, and there's a sight distance due to topography.
it improves the safety of the crossing there for pedestrians. And
Okay, so the motion, will you read it back to us, Mark?
Well, Jim, how did you feel about the vision triangle being part of it since it's your motion?
On. Yes.
Okay. So the motion is to install, is it a referral to LNO? Is that the motion, Kathy?
well, I think wouldn't it have to go to the council first before it would go to LNO, or do we?
No, I believe it goes to LNO first, and then it would go to
Council, yes.
the council.
Okay. Okay.
The point that Kathy, I think, is wisely making is that we have one committee that says they don't want to do it, and now this committee is recommending it. So the council can be the arbiter. Otherwise, it goes to LNO, and you've got, well, two of you are on there, or no? Yeah.
Yeah.
Two of them are, and I'm on Public Works. I will say from the Public Works discussion, we were discussing it, not looking at speeding the entire length of South Avenue and it being a major cut through. So if that information had been provided, I think we might have been a little different.
I didn't make the point of the speed, but I did make the point that there was no stopping between those two Parmenter and Park. So I did try to make
You
that.
did that, but I think I wasn't thinking that people are using this as much as a cut through as it's become clear tonight.
Yeah.
And I don't know that Public Works fully understood that.
Yeah.
The fact that this is a major cut through street certainly changes my opinion on it.
Good. I'm glad that it does, because I think it needs improvement. So what do you think? Should it go to LNO or should it go to council?
I think it should go to LNO.
I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Because I think there might be some sort of legal thing that needs to get written up that there's a stop sign there.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it does. Okay, are there any more comments or questions? Okay, then we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. We're on to item number 3, ordinance relating to bicycles, electric scooters, similar vehicles in conservancies. At last night's LNO, we recommend to council to amend the ordinance as you see on your screen right now. Has everybody had an opportunity to take a look at that?
And Dan, this is what Conservancy Lands looked at.
Right.
Yes, this is what Conservancy Lands looked at, and this encompasses the questions that the Friends of Pheasant Branch had in the electric scooters as defined by Wisconsin statutes. Friends of Pheasant Branch were concerned that all 3 classes of electric bikes be included in the ordinance, and by defining it by Wisconsin statute, it encompasses all 3 classes. So it takes in, this ordinance takes into account, their request takes into account what CLC had recommended or acted upon.
Where does it for the elderly people and some of the handicapped people who require some sort of motive device?
Mhm.
Does this prohibit that now, or is it?
No.
No, it does not.
Okay, thank you.
I'd make a motion to approve the ordinance change.
Recommend approval. Okay.
I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. If there are no other comments.
I have a question for you, Dan, quickly, so I understand. So you
Yes.
said this was based on CLC and Friends of Pheasant Branch concerns or recommendations?
Part of it
Yes.
had to do with, that had already been to CLC as far as a committee. It hadn't gotten to us yet.
But my question is,
Yeah.
are there people that are promoting this ordinance who are wishing to ultimately prohibit these from the bikeable parts of the Conservancy trails?
No, they're
No.
not. That's not what this ordinance does.
Well, I know the ordinance doesn't, but by putting them all into one category, does it potentially lead to that as the next step? That was my question.
No.
By
Mark,
state?
the
Go ahead, Susan.
Friends are pushing being more inclusive of electric vehicles. It
Okay.
sounds like there's been a major shift in policy from 10 years ago.
Okay, that is new information for me. I had never heard that before. So, okay,
I was surprised when I saw it too.
okay. That was my only question. I was just curious because I've had in my head for 20 plus years that,
Bikes are
Well,
bad.
anyway.
Mark has included in the staff comment, the PBC committee may wish to weigh in light of the increased use of such vehicles along public streets and sidewalks. Do we want to discuss that a
Oh.
little?
oh, that's right. Thank you for reminding me, Kathy.
Mhm.
The reason I put that in there is because I didn't know the background that Dan just outlined and Susan.
Okay.
Now I kind of wish I hadn't put that as a staff comment.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Because specifically the ordinance, what's before you is related to conservancies. Well, what I wrote was you may wish to weigh in on this issue, even though it wasn't referred here. You may want to weigh in on this because it's been on other streets. So I guess I wrote it appropriately, but you can't discuss, you couldn't discuss whether to regulate them on other outside the conservancy.
Okay.
That's not before you. So it was just, all right, let's just delete the last minute of tape. So.
Yeah, we'll take that conversation up another time.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the draft of the City of Middleton's Comprehensive Plan 2020.
Thank you, Dan.
Mark sent out all the, a week or so ago, or sent out all the documents so that people could take a look at that.
Mhm.
So what we've been doing, just a little background, we have referred this to the Plan Commission, I should say, which I help staff, referred this to 10 committees, and it's going to a few more than that. And most of the committees that have reviewed it already have been very supportive. In fact, I'd say pretty much everyone's been supportive. There's been some differences of opinion at the Plan Commission, but generally the committees have been supportive of the sections that are pertinent to them. I want to emphasize that. So what we referred to is specifically the transportation section, which is about 30 pages long. This hopefully it doesn't come as a surprise to you because the strategies, the overall strategies have been, the concepts of them, maybe not the exact wording has evolved, but the concepts I've been trying to keep you up to date on those as they've evolved. But this has evolved from when you last saw it in July. So there's I think it was 8 strategies for the transportation section. Yeah, there's 8. And the concepts are, first and foremost, reclaiming the public streets so that they safely accommodate the most vulnerable roadway user, the pedestrian. That's the first concept. The second pertains to safety, and this is a new concept, the idea of adopting a Vision Zero approach. I had heard about that recently in Madison, and I've been reading about it. It's a movement around the world. The idea is that all crashes are preventable. And so therefore the vision should be that we have 0 crashes that lead to fatalities and severe injuries. So that's the second strategy. The third builds on the idea of pedestrians as the most vulnerable and says we want streets to be oriented for pedestrians, but now we also want to establish and maintain a robust bikeway network that is comfortable and accessible to people of all ages, so that if when they don't bike, that when they don't walk, that they next choose the bicycle or other forms of micromobility as transportation when possible. The next strategy then is focusing on transit, and Alder Olson, I'm sure will want to comment on this. I think the idea of emphasizing transit, and maybe you have some language here, Kathy, to beef this up. But so if you don't walk or bike, then transit is your next preferred mode of transportation. Fifth is to reform the city's parking regulations, which goes a bit beyond the purview of this committee, other than the idea of trying to get people to not drive or have to park as often. I mean, that's one concept. But then when you park, that you park somewhere and then you walk. You're able to walk and have comfort. Not have people focus, not have downtown or neighborhoods oriented towards car parking facilities. Number 6 and 7 have to do with the airport and railroad, and 8 is forging partnerships with other agencies to strengthen community linkages, improve efficiencies, create great places. So that's the framework, and then each of these strategies has various action statements as well. So with that, I'm just going to let you guys tell me what you want to talk about. I'm here to listen, and Daphne's here to listen as well. We are here to, actually, we had a little presentation to go with this too. I just forgot about that. I don't know that we need to give it. It's on comprehensive planning. Daphne, were you planning to give that, or? I think I was supposed to give that. I forgot.
No, I wasn't planning on doing any.
No, that's fine, Daphne. I'm still focused on helping keep track of the meeting that I had forgotten that I was supposed to give that presentation. Does anybody have a question as to what comprehensive planning is in the context of our comprehensive plan and why we're doing a comprehensive plan? Because I'd be happy to elaborate on that if you do have those questions.
So has everybody had an opportunity to take a look at this, and does anybody have any suggestions, or would we like to go over the header of each of the action items? I don't know how in depth that people have looked at this.
I'm in a bit of a pickle here because the Commission on Aging hasn't reviewed this. They're going to review this at their next meeting on the 19th.
Okay.
I think I would prefer for myself to defer any comments until that time.
And that's fine.
Hopefully we'll have some good comments from our commission.
I would have a question on this. When we are making proposals now or recommendations, for example, even something like the stop sign that we just recommended, should we be making those recommendations with these 8 strategies in mind?
Yes, I would say. these strategies are a way of giving us kind of a coherent plan moving forward. So, and I think that's something that Kathy has talked about quite a bit with the complete streets, is that as we make recommendations and plans, we kind of have to, I think, look at them in light of what our overall goals are, so that we don't get sidetracked or start to piecemeal things together.
Dan, I would also add, this whole document's going to give council an overall view of what the city wants. And since none of us serve on all the committees, this is a good source of information for us.
Correct. Yep.
Are those specific recommendations going to be found in this part of the plan, or will they be in another section for, like a matrix showing a timeline and short-term, long-term types of fixes?
And that's a very good question. That has come up at another committee that I serve on, and it was recommended at that meeting that we have a page that does that exact same thing, has kind of the short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals and priorities. I think that's an excellent idea, because it helps bring things into focus, and it gives you things to strive for in a timeline. So I'd like to see that in every section myself.
I'm looking
Dan,
for,
I agree with you.
yeah. I'm looking for the presentation that I was supposed to give. I had it on my screen earlier today, and unfortunately closed that window. So because it addresses some of what you're asking. But your conversation's going well anyway, so you don't need it.
So does anybody have any specific questions on any of these actions? Or as a committee, are we in favor of these actions? Is there anything that we think is glaringly missing?
Well, I have some comments. One thing I wanted to know is like on the sidewalk priority, which is under our purview. Once a sidewalk has been evaluated and determined that that one is not going to be installed, does it show back up on this sidewalk map? I'm thinking Hillcrest is an example. That has already been evaluated and determined not to have it. And I think I see it again on the map.
Actually, maybe Daphne can comment on that, because she generated this. She worked with Abby more than I did. Go ahead, Daphne, and I can fill in any gaps of what I understand after you talk.
Yeah, so for this map, all we really did was we just looked at like where there were no sidewalks. So even if it was already determined that a sidewalk wouldn't go in, I think like Wood Road was also one of those.
Right.
We still did kind of like a ranking based off of, the arterial, the size of the road, if it was close to any like specific like centers or like recreational areas, like parks. So those were all kind of compiled into it. And I think like it's basically just like a map to see, where we need to focus on putting sidewalks. So like Wood Road and Hillcrest, they show up here as like that kind of bluish color, which is like a low priority. So I don't know.
Hillcrest is really showing up as a higher priority. The only reason I'm wondering is I'm going to have a lot of constituent questions when they see this map and say, oh, they're going to put sidewalks in here. We thought that was a settled deal. And that's why I'm just wondering if this is, it just shows where there aren't any. Like, what was the one over by Cromrie? Is that the Wood Road you're talking about?
Yep, that's
Right here, yeah.
So just so we don't alarm anyone.
I think what Daphne's saying is that this analysis was done irrespective of previous decisions for specific streets. This was just isn't that right, Daphne? It's just
Yeah.
taking the criteria, applying it citywide
Okay.
regardless of,
Okay.
Yeah, but it's just to have, you know, in the future, if someone wanted to put in a sidewalk, like say near like the industrial loop or something, we can say, yeah,
Right.
that's a high priority area. We should prioritize something like that.
Could I make a suggestion? And this is in response to these very low and low priority ones that I think most of us expect never to have sidewalks put in. Using the word priority is what's misleading people. So for a very low priority, you're assuming that someday we will get sidewalks on these places. So if we could wordsmith it in some way to sort of indicate that at least very low and low priorities,
Are you talking
maybe
about
not the word priority, but that
importance?
these are areas, importance might be good. So for instance, the ones in Middleton Hills, those would actually be taking away from conservancy land to put the sidewalks in. And I think there would be a huge outcry over that.
One of the things I would say is that, I mean, the question that Kathy, that you've raised, I think is excellent because we can understand the political sensitivity of why come back again and have double jeopardy, if you will, on the same
Right,
issue.
right.
Yeah.
But I will say, even though this methodology was not, you know, we didn't exclude any street from the beginning, but we were influenced in terms of how we prioritize things, because I know I contributed to this, where we made sure the criteria reflected the desire not to have sidewalks along, for example, the Middleton Hills example of where you have conservancy all on one side. You know, you can see that, I'll zoom in on that. You can see it's very, oops, sorry.
Around the detention ponds.
Yeah, so you see the symbol of, and it's obviously a very light symbol, so it's not meant to stand out much. And so the criteria said, okay, it doesn't make any sense. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't make sense. There's a school of thought that says you should have a sidewalk on each side of the street. So that's you know, a reasonable premise as well.
Yeah.
But we basically made sure the criteria were reflecting kind of what the direction was already on a policy-wide, on a citywide policy level, without looking at individual streets that had come up. And so the second level, then the second lowest importance was, you know, the Cromery area that you mentioned. The most controversial one on here likely is the Pheasant Branch Road example, because that as you know, and that the council has previously said we don't want to put sidewalks there either. You know, that's
But I think the term priority is going to mislead citizens. So if we can come up with some other word.
Importance, maybe.
Yes, importance would be good. Because that doesn't imply that we're going to do something, whereas priority does.
I just
What
have
about
two
something
things to
like,
say on that then. Go ahead, Jim.
instead of very low, minimal priority or minimal
Yeah.
need?
Minimal need would be minimal or non-existent need. Because the Middleton Hills one goes into prairie and stormwater detention ponds. So not many people are going to be inclined to walk into a 4-foot tall prairie.
But what's odd is, why is Middleton Springs, which is in a commercial area, why does that come up as that same classification? I guess I would ask Daphne that if she knows. So right down here,
Because that is walked.
Oops, sorry. This is down by the Starbucks, McDonald's.
Oh yeah, I think it's because so like basically how this map was made was it was weighted, And so if it was, you know, a local, it was considered a local road, it was weighted like 1 point. If it was like a major arterial, it was weighted like, I think it was like 5 points or something like that. And so, and then if it was like next to a school, it got another point. If it was next to conservancy or something, I think we took away a point. Stuff like that is how we weighted it. And so I guess since it looks like this road could have been maybe like considered a local road or something. So it just started base level as a lower point.
I would say it is as important, if not more so, than the street opposite on Allen Boulevard. Because it's in a very dense residential area with lots of apartments. And people would go through there to get to the shopping center.
Okay, well, that's good feedback. You know, I think what came out of this analysis is shows that our business park, where there's heavy trucks and frankly quite a few people walking, because in the last 10, 15, 20 years, there's been an uptick in people walking at lunch hour, et cetera, for exercise. And so this clearly has bubbled up as a high priority or high importance because of, you know, it clearly is. And so a lot of these make sense. Some of them, like Lisa Lane, I don't know why that would be, especially with the apartments going in. So it sounds like maybe we need to revisit the weighting or, you know, but then we need to add a note to address Kathy's concern, which is if we need to somehow put in a disclaimer and acknowledge that, you know, the city has decided not to approve sidewalk.
And to that point, it's not a bad idea to revisit them every once in a while either. When when that street gets redone again, maybe it is another conversation you have. I just want to make sure that, you know, it did have a kind of a higher priority, and I don't want to alarm anyone, but you know, I can understand why it's there. It shows that there isn't a sidewalk, and if the street ever has work, these things aren't going to happen unless there's street work involved anyway. So.
Right. And to me, it seems like this map is more of an internal document, in my opinion. And then if you had this map and made all the lines the same color and said missing sidewalk connections and included that in the comprehensive plan, it would make more sense to me, because you have these strategies that I mean, number one is reclaim public streets so they safely accommodate the most vulnerable roadway users, you know, and it goes on and on. So by not having sidewalks, you go against that, and then you also go against any complete streets that the city passes later on. Like, that's the only thing I see. So just a thought.
So you would say just these are the missing sidewalks, and then as this document could live in planning somewhere, but as far as the comprehensive plan, this is just showing where. I like that.
I just don't think the general public needs to know how. It just seems like it opens up a can of worms for people, because it does on this call. Even people, it's very subjective when you're talking about, you know, people's streets close to them and how they rank them. You know, everyone's going to rank them differently. If 8 of us on the call rank these streets, we'd all have different maps.
That's true.
Nate, I agree with you too. Just call it incomplete, no sidewalks.
Love it. Yep.
Any more comments, suggestions?
On the sidewalks or anything?
On anything. The floor is open for anything.
Another pedestrian issue.
I just,
Go ahead, Mark.
Go ahead.
No, I just said, are there any other pedestrian issues? It wasn't worth repeating.
Oh, on page
Kathy?
23, you have the maps of the pedestrian crashes and bicycle crashes. There's different colored dots, but we need a legend on that. If you had one, would be good.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't realize that the legend wasn't there. Okay,
No.
thank you.
Yeah.
Nate also wrote to me earlier today and talked about beefing up our maps, and there might be a few more maps we could add. So Nate, I'd be interested in whatever reaction you have to be more specific about mapping. Anything you have, I would welcome.
Okay. Also, another comment I just had was on page 24. It's the center column, the last bullet point there. It says, refresh more regularly the paint used for crosswalks. I would like to say that there's certain crosswalks we should be using different paint so it's more durable, that, you know, not just putting on more paint. I mean, I think something that if we could get a longer lasting, more visible paint,
I've been disappointed with how pavement markings, how quickly they fade. It's really surprising, and then we don't have the budget or the staff resources.
Right. I think that it's like anything. It's the labor that gets you. You can use cheap products, but eventually it's going to come back and you're going to pay for it.
Good point.
Page 39. I guess as a pedestrian, as a committee, I would like to see them use better paint.
By the way, Daphne, do you know how to get rid of this column on the right?
Just click on tools again.
Oh, thank you. Page 39, Kathy? I thought I heard you say 39.
I did, but I think we got to go back a little bit. Page, when we're talking about working with Madison Metro, I'm feeling like we have to be, the words we're using here have to be more forceful, more, like we should work with them, but I don't feel like we're getting the services. I think that we need there's more I think that we need to do. Work with Madison Metro and potentially other contracting partners to implement, I just want something that say we will instead of we should. Does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm looking for, you said we should. Well, here it is. Middleton should request that Metro Transit establish. Well, maybe that's not the example you're thinking of.
Yeah, the city should actively participate in the network. It just, the whole thing seemed like Middleton should request that Metro Transit establish a route that directly connects Greenway Center to downtown Middleton. It'd be nice, but we don't think it's going to happen. If
I would suggest that we request that whoever interacts with Madison Metro really emphasize the size of population and how fast we're growing and the need for bus service.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we might not have the ridership simply because we have inadequate bus service.
Well, where I would like to explore more is this micro transit. I mentioned it at tourism, where during off-peak hours, maybe we just have micro transit instead, where we can have people call in if they need service. And that might be something that, based on what I've been hearing from people, that might be something that a referendum could be used for if people wanted, if we wanted to separate a little more from Madison Metro and not be so, I mean, we're giving them a lot of money and it seems like our services are getting less, and so there might be more interest in that than we know.
Well, I think we're going to be left with no choice but to start to look at alternatives because of the rising cost of our share to Madison Metro. And like you say, the declining service we're getting and the number of residents, if all the permitted projects get done in 2021, there'll be another 1,200 units, I believe it is, in the city of Middleton. So, you know, we try to put our housing on bus stops and terminal areas, which is one would think would increase the ridership. And if we're not going to get the level of service that we can afford from Madison Metro, we're going to have to start to seriously look at different alternatives, and we need to start exploring that probably sooner rather than later.
Right.
Or we're just going to be captive to their budgeting.
Yeah, and
So
this is a major sustainability issue. I mean, do we know, for example, how many people work downtown near the Capitol and how many are at the university? And to be honest, if you were at the university, the parking prices that you pay in addition to gasoline and wear and tear on your car, it would be way cheaper to ride the bus, but it's got to be efficient.
Why don't they bring up the issue of light rail from Middleton to Madison? I mean, the railroad.
That would help too.
Pardon?
That would be helpful.
Well, I mean, because the tracks goes past the new state
Right
office
past-
building, it
yeah.
goes past the university, it goes past University Hospital, and it ends up in downtown Madison where the rest of the state office buildings are. That I was kind of appalled when they weren't able to, you know, continue with this. It's really not a Commission on Aging issue, but as a citizen, how much more money are we going to spend on widening University Avenue?
Right.
So they get caught in traffic, and with light rail, that offers a better opportunity, maybe more economical
And sustainable.
and sustainable. I mean, Chicago does pretty well with their transit.
Excuse me. Well,
I thought you would be interested in seeing, this is the ridership map for Metro Transit. Just for context, obviously the huge circles here are in the W, that's the West Transfer Point. So try and ignore that because it's misleading. It's not, it's just, there's a lot of people getting on buses there because they're transferring buses. But it is fair to compare Middleton with, let's look at the rest of the University Avenue corridor. So this is, of course, over by the DOT building by, I'm sorry, this is Seago and the DOT building. Here's Hilldale. And compare that circle size with what we have here in Middleton. And I haven't changed the scale of the map. To my surprise, actually, the highest ridership estimate now, these are estimates based on sort of indirect measure. I'll go into methodology in a moment, but I've always, in the past, thought that the highest ridership stop was on Allen Boulevard and Marshall Park, and it was, but now it's actually up at Arbor Lakes at the Quick Trip there. And then, you know, the branch and Pheasant Lane intersection where we put that shelter, and that's why we put the shelter there, so that, you know, it's a more heavily used bus stop. If I zoom out, the dots change in size,
Right.
but then here at Greenway, you know, we've got some ridership in downtown Middleton and Middleton Hills. Those are really the you know, you can see the 6 or 7
Mark,
heaviest
what
bus stops.
I'm seeing is this is people that are economically totally dependent on bus service because they don't have cars are using this.
In
But
part,
but let me finish. But
So I'm sorry.
what I realized when I first moved here, this was a long time ago, but I had been used to in graduate school riding the bus all the time because it was quick, it was easy, it was cheap, and got me out of the parking issues. I was willing to do it here as a new faculty member, and when I discovered it was going to take over an hour or so to get to the university and an hour to get back, that makes it impossible.
Right.
And that's what I think our problem is in Middleton is
I agree.
we need some express buses going to the university and downtown.
Whether it's economics as a factor, I would argue, I mean, that's clearly a major factor, but this also is the best bus service in the city because it's the direct, you can get on the bus at Arbor Lakes and you have a direct shot.
Right.
You don't have to travel around the rest of the city. Whereas where Kathy lives down here, you know, you've got to do a circuitous route. And right now with the pandemic and scale, you know, the service has been altered. So this is even harder to get from the south side
Well,
of Middleton.
that's exactly what I'm saying. We
Right.
need some transfer places so that you could easily get from one place to another.
And,
You know,
right.
where you could transfer and pick up a more express bus.
When the
Yeah.
council adopted the BRT resolution a couple months ago, you know, we talked about how can we benefit from enhanced transit, BRT, or something that directly links to it. And that's, we had language in there which said we want to see an enhanced corridor along transit, along University Avenue, enhanced transit corridor, and then Greenway down to what will be the, let me go back to that map. Here it is. So here's the, I'll zoom in a little bit. Here's the BRT route that Madison is planning. So where you see the 44 is actually a page number. That's Mineral Point Road. So clearly we could have and should have enhanced route that comes up here. Look at the blue, which shows the density of our employment density, 10 to 25. What is that a unit of? 10 to 25 people per, I don't know what that is at the moment, sorry. But it's an employment density measurement. So I agree with you that we need to make it more convenient for people.
Mark,
Well,
what are you hearing from the other surrounding communities? Are they looking at other options now? What's going on? Because that's one thing that the council is we need to get ahead of.
I talked to Fitchburg's transit planner. I lost my, they are looking at options. I haven't talked to them for a couple months now. I will add that to my list to give them a call.
Right.
Sun Prairie.
Mark, I'm also wondering how detailed in looking at these routes is Metro doing for setting them up? Because this was another thing from when I was a graduate student on Tuesday mornings at 7:30 in the morning to get students to their 8 o'clock classes. They would run 2 buses. The first one would fill up and it would go straight into the university. Do they even consider things like that?
Yes. Yes. For planning their BRT specifically, or just in general with their transit
Just
planning?
in general. And so they
We-
put a second bus on those extra crowded days.
Right, right. I mean, that's because the ridership is so strong along the university corridor, and there's so much housing going in now at Hilldale that corridor from Hilldale in is really, you know, becoming much more transit heavy. And so if everybody gets on the bus leaving downtown Madison to get there, there's no room for Middleton riders. So that's why they've had to add. We are, with Bus Rapid Transit, there will be an opportunity for us to connect with the transit system at Hilldale. And frankly, this is, I'm not going to put this in the minutes, but I've heard that Metro Transit is even still looking at the option of having alternating buses coming out to Middleton. I don't want to, I'm not going to make a public statement about that, but I don't
Right.
want anybody else on the, I don't want to promise something like that, but we are, just because we see this red line on the map, if you've been to large cities, let's say Washington, D.C. or other cities where you've taken the transit system, especially if it's a train, you know how some routes will say, hey, this train is going out to Shady Grove, which is the last stop in Metro system. And some of them don't go out that far, or they'll take a fork in a different direction. We might be one of those forks, because what they want to do is they want to provide more frequent service from Hilldale through the Isthmus, you know, to, let's say, you know, where there's the fork on the east side, or MATC on the east side. So that's where they want service that's every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes, whatever it ends up being. But they don't need that frequency of service along Mineral Point Road. So we may benefit from this yet. We shall see. I'm still reasonably optimistic that BRT will have a direct benefit for the city. Even if we aren't on the route directly, it will still have beneficial impacts. But I'm also very deeply concerned, as Dan and others have already said too, that it's not sustainable what we have right now. We are capped, I think was the word Dan used. And that's, we need to have more muscle and more input on how the transit system is run and how it benefits the city.
And I think the only way we do that is with the surrounding communities. We have to have an alliance there and see if there's power in numbers. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then in terms of the rail corridor, I don't remember who brought that up. Ken did. We, going back to the 90s, we're very supportive of the commuter rail Transport 2020 project. I think it's been a while since I've written this chapter now, but I think I referred to that somewhere.
You did. Yes.
Yeah. And so, once the state started moving away from the high-speed rail concept, around that same time, the commuter rail, the climate for funding commuter rail in Washington and getting support for that, for a commuter rail system in Madison was not favorable. And so they shifted gears and went to bus rapid transit. And instead of following, the only reason Middleton was prioritized was because the train tracks went through Middleton. And we have employment here, as you can see on this map. But I'm not surprised that when they started going to BRT, which is much more flexible to where you route that, I'm not surprised they picked the Mineral Point Road corridor. I frankly would have done the same thing, because it's more centrally located in Madison, and there's a heck of a lot of opportunity for redevelopment there, especially with the mall.
But don't you think this is a county-wide issue?
Absolutely.
Look at Wanakee and look at Verone and look at Sun Prairie. If you really look at the maps of Madison, that all these rail lines head into downtown Madison. I mean, that was the kind of the hub in the old days for the railroad, but there's lines coming in from Wanakee. Now there's no line in from Verona. There's something in from Fitchburg and Sun Prairie that I'm kind of perplexed why the county doesn't take this issue up instead of falling back on Madison.
I think we're also in an era where we don't need to be reliant on central Madison. Not everybody wants to go downtown. We are actually, like Madison, Middleton has a net importer. We have more population during the day because we import so many people to work here than we are at night. So like Madison, we're a central city in that respect. So people come here and then they live elsewhere. So we aren't, the majority of Middleton, people who work in Middleton or live here do not go to downtown Madison for work. So that model of the central city has evolved where we have these clusters around urban areas. So I respect, I totally am on board with what you're saying. I wish we had used our rail corridors for transit, but that's not something Middleton can do alone, obviously. Yeah. It's got to be a regional thing.
Or county-wide.
Well, that's why the county being involved would be helpful, because there is a lot of business on the west side. So Middleton has a lot. Verona's got Epic. That's a huge employer. And a lot of those people live on the west side, so they need to get there.
But funding both bus and rail and making investments for both technologies is,
I'm just talking about, we could have bus service that goes from Middleton to Verona.
Understood. Okay.
Helpful. But I'm not sure that Madison Metro is really looking at where all the jobs are and where people live in relation to those jobs.
Well, then that's an issue that we're going to have to work through. But my question is, in the document, everything that we've said here, is there a statement that you wish to be included in this document? I mean, this has been a good conversation, and I think we all can agree that we have some work to do as far as our transit.
So
I think we need a statement of, we need to work on getting these other entities to be to work on efficient ways of providing transportation that is also sustainable based on workforce and where that workforce lives, based on work opportunities and where the workforce lives.
But Susan, is that putting the burden on somebody else, or what is Middleton going to do to be proactive to do that?
Providing them
it's nice
with,
to say Madison Metro, it'd be nice if you did this, but
I think we need to help Madison Metro with providing them the data. So I'm not sure they've even looked at where the jobs are, or at least find out if they have.
Sounds like a job for a regional transit authority.
Well, and I will say
But
this,
that's
we
illegal.
have, I'm sorry, the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, maintains what are called TAZ maps, traffic analysis zone maps, and those are, it's kind of like a census map where you have a grid. It's not really a grid per se, but you have shapes for every part of the metro area, and they assign employment to population and employment to these shapes, and then they run a model about where people are coming and going. And thanks to Bluetooth technology and more modern data collection opportunities, they're actually, instead of laying out the old tubes to try and doing origin destination studies, they actually can use Bluetooth, and they've studied people's Bluetooth devices on the Beltline and have figured out where people are coming from and going. So you'd be surprised actually how much more this is being part of the, how much more the modeling, traffic modeling, how far it actually has come. Mike Davis and I have long felt that the metro area planners have undercounted the amount of jobs we have in Middleton. And so one of the topics in this plan is to make sure that we provide data on a regular basis to them to make sure they're aware of all the jobs we have. So your concern is very well founded, and I think it's, we have that. That can be, going back to what we said at the beginning, short-term, mid-term, long-term priorities. I think that would, having updated data from which we base our more detailed plans is very important. So that probably is a pretty high priority.
Yes.
So.
I'd like to circle back on what Nate just said, the Regional Transit Authority. Do we have, I don't know, do we have something like that, or is that something that?
That's state statute. It's illegal to have that right now. You'd have to change the law.
Okay.
We tried and it got voted down or something.
Maybe part of the comprehensive plan is to monitor when the law gets changed again.
Yeah, or have something in there about, the communities outside of the central business district of Madison, trying to figure something out. I don't know.
Could we suggest a referendum for just getting input on desirability of of rapid transit from our citizens?
Would that be the citizen survey would do that, though, that we started adding that to the survey?
No, I would actually do it as we did a sustainability referendum.
Non-binding?
When we actually vote, and you get a lot more participation.
Yeah, I'm not, the sustainability is a different question because it's what can Middleton do? And now you're asking for a referendum that is a referendum question that's not totally within our purview to pursue. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, but maybe I'm not making myself clear. At a regular election, we need to ask, do the citizens of Middleton support the concept of the rail rapid transit systems? Not that it's requiring us to do it, but to get a good feeling for what citizens want. And I'm totally blanking on, we just recently did that with on one of the elections on, I think it was sustainability, that had, a national plan that we did put on our ballot.
Yeah, that was quite a while. Yeah, that was.
It was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But something like that to get a really more complete view of how people feel on improved transportation.
Mark, were there any questions on transit in this last? I can't recall right now on the last survey.
I doubt it. I didn't review the survey. I wasn't involved in it, but I doubt it. I would have been asked if there was.
Because I think that's
the Polpo survey. I don't remember them.
I doubt there was. It's yeah.
So are you suggesting that is your idea of a referendum for discussion purposes, or are you suggesting that we put it somewhere in this comprehensive plan? Because right now it's a great idea, but right now what we're trying to do is tidy up the transportation section of the comprehensive plan so that we can get it back to Plan Commission and get this long overdue plan done.
Right.
Yeah.
So and a lot of the things that we talked about are great ideas, but what I'm asking you is there specific verbiage of the things that we've discussed that you want put in this comprehensive plan?
I heard strengthening language to be more forceful, for lack of a better word, for more proactive.
Mm-hmm.
More proactive is a great way to put that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I wrote your forceful in the notes.
Thank you.
And just a statement that transportation is incredibly important for this city, and that we've got to really focus on that. Or transit, rather, not transportation. And maybe it's just getting one correctly worded sentence at the beginning.
Yeah.
Can I interject? Has Middleton contacted like Verona and Wanakee and Sun Prairie concerning these issues? And maybe they're not doing a long-range plan, but maybe we should be partnering with these other cities on some of these issues.
Mm-hmm.
The answer to that is yes. I reached out to Sun Prairie, Fitchburg, and Verona specifically. It's hard to compare us with Sun Prairie and Verona because they have very limited contracts with Metro Transit. In Verona's case, Epic basically foots the bill. Lucky for Verona.
Mm-hmm.
Sun Prairie only has a small part of their community that's served by Metro Transit, so the hit that they're taking isn't as significant budget-wise. I mean, the budgetary hit. And Fitchburg is our best comparison, and they are looking at options. I just haven't talked to them for a couple of months. So
this is a 20-year plan, and I mean, wouldn't you think you would put something in there that might be one of the goals? Is again, maybe if it's illegal to have a Dane County regional transportation plan or something, but something in there for long range planning, because we're going to get Pearl Harbored with this stuff again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Dan, maybe if I can just mention the action statements quickly to see if anything else comes to mind to help provide a little focus. So the strategy for for transit is restructure our transit system to integrate with bus rapid transit. We talked about that. Second one is regularly study opportunities for making cost-effective transit service enhancements. And I'm hearing maybe we need to strengthen or enhance the language there, and talk about partnerships with our other communities. I think that's what I'm hearing there. Third is to provide bus stops that are accessible, safe, comfortable, and well maintained. That's more in our power anyway. We have been working diligently toward that. I provided some data to that effect. So those were the three action statements. Anything else specific to transit? Maybe under number 2, the exploring opportunities for making enhancements. That's where the idea of working with our neighbors, our other communities to develop alternatives. Maybe that's where that idea comes in.
This is.
The reason I bring this up is because there's a lot of elderly people that one of the big problems we have right now because of COVID is isolation, but there's not a really a easy way or a safe way for some of these people to go visit their friends on the other side of town. And even in some of the adjoining towns. And, you know, down the road, we're going to have a better designed transportation system. And I think you're getting that with this 20-year plan. So.
Mhm. This is Kathy. I would also, I don't know if this goes in the plan or it doesn't, but as we're talking to these other communities, I would like to hear more what their thoughts would be on this microtransit, where if they just, during the off-peak times, if we just have an on-call kind of service. I'd like to hear what they would think of that. Yeah.
Thank you. Sounds like, Kathy, you're advocating for, I don't think I used the word microtransit in here at all. In fact, I'm pretty sure I didn't.
I think you did.
We use micro-mobility solutions.
Oh, there it is. I said here, down here, microtransit.
Yeah.
Work with Metro Transit. And oh, here we go. And potentially other contracting partners with microtransit solutions.
Right. And that might have been where I want to make sure that doesn't get lost that it's something I think that I think we should have some kind of backup plan for the Metro.
So you'd like more emphasis on that?
But that's me, and I don't know how the other.
And I agree with you 100%. We need to start looking at alternatives.
Mm-hmm. Mark,
Maybe just say alternatives, that we should look at alternatives and not even define the alternatives.
Right. So under the action statement, regularly study opportunities and consider alternatives to Metro Transit.
Yes.
Mark, I also just wanted to say, we talked about this a little bit at tourism last night. I would think a microtransit solution would be better for Middleton than a B-cycle, because it would be able to be used year round. But that's, once again, that's my opinion, and I'd like to hear what other people. I would think tourism would be on board with some of the funding for this, because it would be, they wouldn't need a trolley or anymore if we had an on-call kind of after peak hours. But I can't speak for them either. But
And where's that blurring that line with Lyft and Uber? You know, it's sort of that.
But
you know.
but no, I don't think Lyft and Uber serve Middleton that well, do they?
They serve us. I would agree. I mean, I've used Uber before, but it could be better.
I don't think it's servicing Middleton that well. Just from what I've heard, but that's okay. I won't say anymore.
I'm calling Uber right now to see where they are, just out of curiosity.
Oh, okay.
All right. Do we have any more? Do we have any more suggestions for this, or do we have a motion to recommend this language to the Plan Commission?
If motions are if it's hard to craft a motion based on what you've described, the way I think it was the Public Works Committee did it was a question of whether anyone on the committee objected. Was there a consensus on the discussion that you've had? You know, were there any objections, any concerns with any of the ideas you mentioned? And then we just list the ideas, and we can state that the head by committee was.
I suggest we do that. It worked well.
Sounds good.
Are we talking about the whole document or just the transit part?
Just the transportation and yeah, it's just that part. The bike, pedestrian.
Okay, the pedestrian part I should have brought this up earlier. Back to page 23 or 24 under D. Talking about maintenance and repairing potholes, etc.
Yep. I thought of you when I wrote this.
Yeah, it sounded familiar. That if there can be something more forceful about, because I think an awful lot of times when you think of a pothole, you think of it in terms of an automobile, possibly a bicycle. You don't think of it that much in terms of a pedestrian, but I think that crosswalk potholes should take some type of priority in getting repaired, both for the pedestrian and also for anybody who might be in some type of motorized vehicle, a wheelchair, scooter, whatever, because they could very easily get caught in one of those. And I don't know if something like that could be addressed in any of these bullet points. You know, it does say prioritize snow removal from designated bike commuter routes. It just sort of sounds like, in reading this, yes, this maintenance should be done, but I think in some of those, the crosswalks with potholes or repairs, if needed, should take some type of priority.
That is certainly the intent, and I can tweak the language a bit. You know, I wrote this section for safety to pertain to everybody.
Sure.
But I agree with you that from a prioritization standpoint, you know, we're all pedestrians, and some of us have different abilities in terms of walking. But when there's a hazard in a crosswalk, you know, it has a different effect on someone in four wheels versus someone who's on their feet or in a wheelchair or a walker, you know. So I think that point is very, very valid.
Okay. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
The other issue is clear the snow from transit boarding areas and shelters within 24 hours. Is that an ordinance? That's a long time. You know, that's like a day. They should, you know, they should be within 12 hours or something.
Well, I would love to see 12 hours. Unfortunately, our street crew, you know, we only have so many personnel, and when you have a heavy, you know, 6 inches, 8 inches of snow, it takes a couple passes, and they work at all hours to clear the snow.
I understand.
You get into overtime, and so 24 hours, frankly, if we can hit 24 hours.
This is a planning document. I would suggest putting it in, and that could encourage us, because it's at council that then needs to simply hire some more public works staff. But since it's a planning document, that's what we should strive for.
Maybe if we just leave shovels at these areas too, that some neighborhood residents may do it for us.
Nate, if we leave what?
Oh, if you leave a shovel at some of these key locations, that some of the neighborhood residents might do it.
Or ideally a snowblower.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that looks like fun. Let's do that.
What I like about Nate, he's so optimistic.
Well, you know, when I retire, I don't have to wait till I retire, but I love removing snow with a snowblower. I don't do that very much, and so I've actually thought about volunteering.
You want to do mine this winter?
So
I'll even pay you half of what the company wants.
let the record show that city staff is negotiating additional compensation. No, just kidding.
And working at a discount.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that. But
Okay, another thing on snow removal that I think is really critical for the downtown area. We need more, we don't clear the entire terraces in the business area, so they're full of snow. And especially around the senior center, there are lots of seniors that are walking up and down the street to get to a place where they can get over to the sidewalk. We need some of that terrace snow removed.
Well, remember, this doesn't fall under Public Works anymore, so.
Well,
CDA does it, correct?
Yeah, CDA, I'm just saying this is a policy the city needs to figure out how to get the snow off the terraces.
well, and
It
it's
would
actually,
improve our downtown tremendously.
and actually it's a problem wherever a plow has gone around the corner of an intersection and they've created a wide swath, and sometimes you have 5 feet of snow from where there's
Yes.
normally, and that just sits there and ends up sitting there for days, if not weeks, if not the rest of the winter.
Mhm.
And then someone puts a little path through there. So yeah, it's, again,
We
it's a
could do
matter of,
better.
well, I agree, but it's a matter of using the resources you have. So
Right, but this is a planning document.
right, I understand.
So I think we need to bring it to attention. Whether it gets done is another issue.
I think that you have to be a little bit careful, even though it's a planning document, in, you start to micromanage the document. So I guess the question is, do you have a statement or a sentence that you would like?
Well, I know once it builds up that they bring in a truck to remove it. It's something that you can't do it after every snowfall. It's only when it gets really high, and it is and it is getting taken care of. So they do that. Very expensive to do that too.
Maybe just enhanced snow removal on bus stops, terraces in business areas, corner crosswalks, and so on. We want to strive for improving that.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, it sounds like you have quite a bit there, Mark.
I have some editing to do, yes.
All right, if we don't have any more comments on that, let's move on to
Can I
items.
just ask one thing
ahead.
about that? The last staff comment there, also note comments from local cycle advocate. I didn't see those notes in the supporting documents.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I had that in my notes to discuss with you. And you're saying it wasn't in the packet?
I didn't see
was.
it. I didn't see it under
here-
just.
Here it is.
Kirsten's
It's on-
comments were there.
It's on
Wait a
page 56.
Oh, wait a second. I had clicked the wrong heading. Okay, I was.
I'm really glad you brought it up. Thank you. And I don't normally forward this. If it's the work of the committee, I wouldn't normally do this, but we all know that Kirsten has provided a lot of her insights and time, and she makes a lot of good comments. So I just let her know about this, and within an hour or two, she provided this list. So I wanted to be sure that it got reflected in our discussion as well. So thank you, Kathy. So focus on the safe east-west routes through the city and to connecting to other communities. She's mainly a bicyclist, Ken, in case you don't know.
Yes.
Think heavily on how easy it is for cyclists and pedestrians to cross busy intersections. We need to avoid having a 3-point crossing like at Century and Allen. What she means by that, or Allen University, that's a good example too. So intersections where there aren't 4 crosswalks, if you want to go from the shortest distance doesn't have a crosswalk, and then you have to go around 3 crosswalks. That's her complaint. We also need to use Madison's system of having a hit crossing button, expedite the light turnover. Oh, what that means is to activate the, like you do at Century and Branch Street, where you can hit the crosswalk and the light turns up, so that you can activate a green light for the crosswalk. She says that Highland Way hasn't been responsive to when it's pressed.
On that issue, just keep in mind that elderly people, take them longer to get across the street. Some of these, the one over by Tiedemann's Pond across Park Street, that baby's off before you get halfway across the street. That's probably an exaggeration, but there should be sufficient time for people that are handicapped or just slower walking to get across these intersections that are
You're
lighted.
Ken, you're talking about the flashing beacon?
Yeah,
Okay, and that's at South and what, Bart?
is that the one by Tiedemann's Pond? Well, you know,
Okay,
well, they got that island there, but man, I don't feel safe in that island.
right,
Are you-
okay.
Are you on, is it the one at Fortune Drive or at Park Street? I mean, South Avenue. Which one are you talking about?
It's the one on, you know, where the city pump station is by Tiedemann's
So,
Pond?
at Fortune Drive. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. I live over here, but I don't know half the streets anymore.
One thought I had along those lines is, wouldn't it be nice if you could, when you press the button, you get a regular interval, but if you knew that if you press twice, you got 50% more.
That'd be a very good idea.
You know, I just thought of that actually. I wonder if there's a way to, there's probably not a way to program that, but okay, I will document that.
Mark, I need to say, I've got a CLC meeting in 5 minutes,
Right.
4 minutes.
Okay, and I'm aware that I was going to be part of that too, but Kelly will cover it for us. So the third comment from Kirsten is to make sure that property owners have not just encouragement but incentive, financial incentive, if you will, to maintain their sidewalks, and then we need to focus more on safe commuting for ped bike transit users, not just recreational users. She says we feel we put much more funding into leisure routes.
And again, I have a question on number 3. Is that an ordinance in the city for 24 hours or can it be less? I mean, if a person can't shovel their walk off within 12 hours, I mean, this is kind of ridiculous. And more, that's an issue for more people, elderly people walking. Sometimes it's just icy and dangerous out there. And, to give them 24 hours might be just a little too long. I don't know. That's probably a city ordinance, but
Yes.
we've walked in the winter and it gets pretty slippery out there.
Dan, do you recall if there's already a dollar amount attached to overhanging vegetation?
I don't know if
can-
there's a dollar amount. It's that if it isn't done, then the city will go out and do
Exactly.
it and then bill the property owner.
Okay,
That's
Yep,
how
that's
it's done.
Yeah,
Okay.
Is that ever enforced? Is that ever done?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
it is
In
done.
response
It
to
is.
complaints.
It's enforcement by complaint generally, and but it's a bit of a process.
Yeah, I bet.
These are all good comments. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna leave now.
Mark, do you want me to hop over to CLC as well?
Kelly said she's happy to cover. She's able to cover it on her own. But
Okay.
if you would like to, you don't need to stay any longer, Daphne. I appreciate your help. So
All right.
you're welcome.
Thanks.
You're welcome to stay, but you're not. You don't need to.
All right.
Now she's got a tough choice. No, this shouldn't.
okay.
Daphne, enjoy your evening, please. Thank you. So by consensus, is everyone on board with your feedback? There wasn't really anyone I didn't hear any disagreements with what everyone was talking about. So.
Well, are we including what Kirsten said? Because if we are, then I would have a couple comments. But if what we talked about before this, I'm good with.
Oh, well, okay. What's your reaction to?
I just don't understand, like Middleton needs to focus more on safe commuting versus recreational users. Don't they cross over also? I mean, people use all the paths. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think what she's probably talking about is the kind of the commuter paths as opposed to the recreational paths that go through the Conservancy. I guess the perfect example would be the North Mendota Trail.
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say. Century bike paths. I mean, I think Middleton puts a lot of money into these things. So and they're to improve the safety. So I'm not, I guess when we have the money.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think in the plan, the verbiage in the plan, that Mark, you know your plan better than I do. So, but don't you have verbiage in there about putting in or about commuter paths and?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about both commuters and recreation. I don't remember exactly where, I trying to think where to look for this. This was heavily oriented to commuting, not so much leisure, because leisure, I saw that more as, Parks and Rec is more. But the way I wrote this was to promote active mobility solutions that enhance health and provide safe routes to schools. That was focused especially, well, all ages, but focusing on kids as well.
I think here you're complete a network of bicycle lanes, and so I think we're addressing that.
I think so.
Yeah,
Kathy's right. We are addressing that.
I mean, there's a school of thought, and we heard this from a Plan Commission member last night. There's a school of thought that says, let's focus more on bike paths, and bike lanes aren't as successful and aren't as welcome on our streets. So I don't happen to agree with that. I think, bike lanes aren't the panacea of safety, but they at least tell people, look, bikes have a right to use the road. I think bicyclists generally appreciate the bike lanes. Ideally, they would be protected with barriers and become even something called a cycle track. To emphasize safe bicycle routes, that's what we're doing also with the idea of a shared street, or, Elmwood and Franklin, and really making these streets have a different feel to them and a different design, so they become more designated bike corridors. I don't agree with the notion that our bike lanes have been not embraced by the bicycling community. I see far more bicyclists now, even on Gammon Road, which was cited.
Yeah.
I think people used to not bike on Gammon and Park Street at all, and I see people on there, not maybe every time I bike or drive by, but I do see them on there now, and they used to not be on there. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think Kirsten's comment is generally reflective of just wishing that, feeling like the city has not has not just our city, but all communities, most communities around the country have focused so much on the automobile that bikes and pedestrians have been secondary. And it's true, they have been. But we are spending a lot of money now with the North Mendota Trail and other routes to correct that wrong.
Duly noted. I think that's true. That's a true statement. I think Middleton is addressing some of the needs there. So good. Thank you.
So if you're, I think that I won't incorporate that comment in the plan in this discussion, because I think what I'm hearing is we are sufficiently doing it. But I will just.
I think you've addressed it in the plan nicely, actually, already.
Yes. So do I.
Okay. But otherwise, I will incorporate. I reviewed her comments, and I think there was general agreement on 1 through 3. 2 and 3 especially. So I'll just reflect that you reviewed her comments and appreciated them and discussed them. So, okay. So is that so the consensus?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is the consensus.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item number 5.
This can be fairly brief. This is on green. I don't remember what the title of this. Here, what did I call this? Policy on use of green crosswalks. So the only reason I put this on the agenda, and it was kind of a last minute decision, was that Sean Sowski had weighed in on this topic from July when you last discussed it. And in general, Sean is of the school of thought that we need to get official endorsement, as we discussed at the last meeting, something called interim approval from the FHWA to allow these this practice of green pavement markings. he did specifically, well, what he did with his analysis of the locations that I had shown you at the last meeting, he basically went through and concluded there's not a consistent policy on Madison. And there's probably some truth to that. I haven't asked, they haven't given me a clear policy document saying this is when we do it. They've been sort of evolving their practice over the last couple of years. They're basically putting green pavement markings, everywhere now. It's everywhere as part of projects. So that's why it's inconsistent. It's now a recent development that they're going all in. They're basically all in on the green pavement markings. So as they do projects like Gammon Road by Westtown, they're putting these in. I think they have found a technology, a material that they're comfortable with, and now they're going ahead irrespective of whether the feds officially allow them to or not. Sean's position is let's petition, let's get interim approval, and that is on my to-do list to work with Sean to fill out the paperwork to do that. Most pressingly is the North Mendota Trail, where that crosses Allen Court and Marina Drive and Highland Way. It'd be nice in my view to have those be with green, but we have a few months to go through that process. Did you have any reaction to Sean's comments, recognizing that he's saying maybe it's not best to do Madison's design approach, but we need a policy or guidance document that we can springboard to develop our own policy? We've been saying that already anyway. So I just put it here for your information, basically, and your reaction.
I like what you just said, Mark, about the North Mendota Trail, because I think the most effective green paint that I ever ride on is when I take the trail to downtown Madison along University Avenue, and those crossings that are painted green really help the cars stop and know where that crosswalk is. And then it also helps the bikers going fast down that hill feel a little more confident that there's a designated area as you're going down, you know what I mean? Or going up, depending which way you're heading, east or west. So especially if the North Mendota Trail is crossing roads and driveways, that seems like a good use of the paint.
Yeah, we just need to develop the policy, and we can't apply it in Sean's mind until we get approval. And unfortunately, the FHWA only allows it for bike lanes and not for bike paths. So it's frustrating, because I think our local standard, by local I mean the Madison metro area standard, is Madison has helped create a standard that I personally, from a staff standpoint, am recommending we emulate. But it's hard to articulate what their standard is because it's not documented. So,
Are there any other surrounding communities that do have a policy, a written policy or a standard?
I will ask Fitchburg. Fitchburg has also been very bike infrastructure oriented. They've got a lot of paths.
What about Milwaukee? We were looking at their Complete Streets program. Maybe they have some green, some verbiage on that.
Yeah, I will. I appreciate those suggestions. I'll do that. And Eau Claire, I think Jim Blodgett used to always talk about Eau Claire.
Yes,
too.
he did. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't been in Eau Claire or Milwaukee now for a couple of years. So I don't know what their current practice is, but I was in Portland and San Francisco in February, and saw in Seattle, I've seen this too, the practices they have, and that's what Madison's doing now. And I find it enormously effective. So I'll do some more research in my downtime.
Look to see if you can find a draft policy that we can take a look at, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. My
But the
opinion
bigger
is it's green paint. Let's just do it.
Well, and it costs more, but I think it's worth the safety benefit. And even if it's not documented as a safety benefit, it doesn't make safety worse. And if it's a perception that it improves, So I'll do that research. And then ultimately, Dan and Kathy, what you're going to be faced with is if the current circumstances remain in place, which is the FHWA doesn't officially grant interim approval of this for bike paths, it's going to be on the council's decision to say, well, based on what we see in other communities like Madison and maybe Milwaukee and elsewhere, we're comfortable going along with this. And that Sean would tell you then you're accepting a liability in case somebody, let's say
Right, yeah.
somebody like Nate is biking along University Avenue and then there's a collision with the car and the driver says, well, this isn't an approved paint, I'm not liable for this. And, it raises that issue potentially.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right, we'll cross that bridge when we
We'll
get
find
to it.
something, yep.
All right. It's getting late and I'll probably have dinner if we haven't already. Can we move on, Dan? Is that okay with you?
Yes, please, by all means. I need to hit the road, so we need to move on.
Yeah, I hear you. So the last item was just updates on, it should have been the 2021 budget, not 2020. Okay, so Metro Transit has backed down from the terrifying news that we got in June. The CARES funding is able to extend. The CARES is the federal, I don't even remember what it stands for. It's the pandemic-related relief to local communities. And so our investment in bus system, the bus service is staying flat for next year. You can see it down here. The budget projection is 494,000. So that is our current understanding. At least that was my understanding as of a couple weeks ago. So we don't have the huge spike, but we are going to have to anticipate increases in the future. You already know that. So I'm going to be working this winter, and I am working with Metro Transit, trying to come up with some ways to make our service more efficient.
Because after 2021, we don't have CARES money.
Right.
Okay, so I just want everybody to be aware that it's not terrifying this year, but that's because we have CARES funding. Okay. Anybody have any questions on that?
Right. And then from a ped bike standpoint, these aren't really projects that we shepherd anyway, but they are that's been public lands approach lately is to try and separate this from conservancy projects. So we now have separate that pedestrian bicycle project line item in the capital budget. And you can see here that both of the projects that were identified for this next year, the finance staff, and I believe the finance committee is endorsing this approach and not funding these projects for 2021. There's a full list of capital projects in your packet. So it's not just ped bike projects, it's some other, especially public works projects. Just due to lack of, it has to be, they have to prioritize. There's only so much money to go around, so much they want to borrow. Finance committee is expected on the 20th, next Tuesday, we'll be making a recommendation to the council. Budget deliberations will take place on November 11th and a public hearing on November 17th. As part of this, the North Mendota Trail is shown here as 21-02. So that is a request to continue our funding that was previously authorized by the council into next year as well. So that remains on the list for funding, which I know Dan is relieved by that, as am I. I will give you a quick update. I wish I put North Mendota Trail on the agenda, but since it's here under budget, we can sneak it in as an update. Construction is starting. I had the utility relocations have been taking place for that first phase west of Allen Boulevard, so between Branch Street and Allen Boulevard. We did get a bit of news yesterday that after doing more soil sampling, that so there's a part of the path that goes behind the houses there. I'm sorry, I don't have a map in your packet. Well, here, since Ken is new, let me pull it up quickly. I'll be quick, Dan. Just a second, I'm having trouble getting to my, there we go. So behind the houses along Century here, here's the quick trip down here. Common ground was here. So Ken, the path is gonna, can you see the arrow?
Mm-hmm.
Green. So the path will come in here, and we're putting a path along the north side of Century Avenue. We couldn't go in front of Century because of both topographic issues with rebuilding driveways and also opposition. So, so the path is going along the edge of the Conservancy, and then coming forward here, unfortunately going to require removal of most of these trees as it transitions between the Conservancy and the street. And then it will run along Century Avenue, continuing to the east city limits. That's the goal. That's what we're working on. That's what's being designed. This part here, for about 800 feet behind the houses, is going to be unpaved for at least 2 years, because the soils are in such bad shape, it's a swamp back here, that there needs to be a period of settling. And so I don't know if we had formally discussed this before or not, but it was something that Gary Huth and the stormwater folks worked out with the contractor as a solution back in July of 2019. So this has been in progress for a while. The council did not bid, it was not included. The paving of this 800-foot long stretch was not included in the project cost. The part here that where it comes back up to Century Avenue, there's going to be some fill brought in, some, you know, to raise the, right now when you go in the path there, when you go into there's a path there now, and when you go in, it drops down pretty quickly. So it's going to be raised up so it's a smoother, a more gentle slope. So where that goes in, that is where they're finding now that could benefit from surcharging over the winter. So I am recommending, we've had some internal discussions here just recently as today, I think it would be prudent not to pave this part until it has settled. Otherwise, we have a good risk of paving and then needing to repair. And so Mike Davis, I haven't heard back from Sean or Matt Amundsen yet, but Mike and I both are leaning in that direction, and that we would set aside the pavement portion of the budget for next year, possibly combining it with the next phase to the east, Dan. So I just wanted, I don't have this on the agenda for a decision, but I wanted your, I guess as part of the general discussion of the budget, and North Mendota Trails listed there. What are your thoughts on that, Dan, in particular, since you've been working on this with me?
Well, from an engineering standpoint, if it's going to last better and be better to wait, and from a budget standpoint, if it's going to be better, then we wait.
Okay, and I think if this were the only part that wasn't paved, it might be different. But since other parts of this are not paved right away either, I don't see any harm in it. It's obviously not my first choice, but why put something in and have it get damaged right away? I think it's the prudent thing to do. So anyway, that's all I had for staff updates on projects with budget and North Mendota Trail. Any
Okay,
questions?
Does anybody have any questions or comments on that? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Whoever was doing that, I said we should adjourn.
Okay. All right, all those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.